Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people truly think they're above everyone else and no one else matters. And in today's episode, people are sharing their stories of wild Karen encounters, guys, on public transit. And one OP tells a story about the time a Karen puts them in the hospital over a bus seat. It's wild. I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So where to begin? My mother is a mega entitled Karen, like the ones you hear about or see videos of. I'm no longer in contact with her, but I have heaps of stories about her when I was younger. So here's one for you. This happened when I was 14 years old, and we had recently moved to another country. The town was small, and there wasn't a whole lot of public transport. There were only a few taxis and one bus which had wheelchair seating. The wheelchair seating area was at the front of the bus, with 3 seats on one side that would fold down from the wall to sit on. Or a wheelchair or baby stroller could sit in front of one of them. So one day, I was with my mom and we had to travel to the next town over, but my mom's car was at the mechanics, so we had to take the bus. The bus arrived not long after we started waiting at the bus stop. When we got on there were already people sitting in the disabled seating. It was a mother with her baby in a stroller, and beside her was a middle-aged man in a wheelchair that lived in our town. There were seats available at the back of the bus, which I assumed we would both sit at. But no, my mom addresses the woman with her baby and she says, "Excuse me, do you mind moving your stroller so I can sit there?" The woman says, "I'm sorry, but no, I can't move. There's nowhere else for it to sit without it being in the way." And that's when my mother Karen says, "But it's in my way. Can't you just sit in another seat?" Again, the woman says, "No ma'am, I'm not moving. Go sit somewhere else." And that's when my mother says, "Well, I have a disability and I can't walk all the way to the back of the bus." Again, the woman says, "I'm sorry, but I was here first and I have my baby here," and my mother then starts to argue with her about changing seats. But that's when I interrupt and say, "No, you don't, Mom. Just stop it and we'll sit up in the back. Stop making a scene." My mom's face goes red from me calling her out on her BS, and she says, "Fine, whatever." And she reluctantly went to sit in another seat. I then apologized to the mom with the baby. I was so embarrassed by my mom's behavior. This was around the time when I started calling her out on her entitlement, and I was sick of her doing stuff like that. But it didn't end there though, because my mom's day was ruined after that. Because she felt she lost against that woman and she blamed me for it. She gave me so much crap the rest of the day. News travels fast in a small town, so her actions made other people look at me as well. And I didn't want them thinking that I was anything like her. I'm not a Karen and I will never be. Good on OP for calling their mother out on her BS, right? But jeepers creepers, the entitlement. You and your baby need to move so I can sit down. Again, I'm just happy to hear that OP shut down their Karen mom quick before it really escalated. Also, it's funny how OP was blamed for ruining mom's day, all because mom felt she needed to win against this random stranger by kicking them out of their seat. Like, is this how some Karens really think? And if you think that was super entitled, listen to this next post. So recently, I was talking with a friend of mine about bus routes, and it brought up several stories of instances we both had on the buses last year, and she wanted me to share this encounter with you. Now, if you've ever taken the bus, they have rules about who can sit where. This allows the elderly, pregnant, disabled, and the sick to sit up front closest to the door and with the most legroom. These seats face the walkway and they fold up, just in case someone's in a scooter or wheelchair. This is important. So that said, my friend's a short, older woman with a wheeled walker and a white woman. Again, this is important. To start the story, we follow my friend as she gets onto the bus, aided by the bus driver. All is normal for a few stops, and then enter the Karen. Karen's a dark-skinned woman of average height, looking no later than mid to late 40s with the complete Karen makeover. The woman sits across from my friend and all is well, until the next stop. A man in a scooter is waiting to be let onto the bus. The bus driver politely says that one of the ladies will have to move so he can lift the seat up to help the man onto the bus. Karen looks at my friend dead in the eyes and she says, "Well?" in the most disrespectful and Karen voice. Hearing that, my friend is stunned for a second. This lady expects her to move to another seat on the bus. In order to do that, my friend will have to climb up 2 large steps with her walker. And this was one of those walkers that has the seat and basket attached to it, so it was on the bulky side. She would have to navigate through the narrow walkway and then leave her walker in the middle of the aisle, which is a safety violation. And it'll also block other passengers from getting on and off the bus. The bus driver steps back onto the bus after lowering the ramp to allow the scooter man to board. And he says, "Ladies?" I'll ask again. At this point, Karen looks at my friend with impatience and she scowls. Not wanting to create any drama, my friend slowly gets up and proceeds to move to another seat. Reaching the steps, she asks the bus driver for assistance. Not just with her walker, but with her vertigo. After several minutes, the bus driver helps my friend into a seat, but he can't fit the walker anywhere. Needing to get back to his schedule, he leaves the walker in the aisle and proceeds to help Scooter Man into a spot. Some of the people on the bus begin to point out how utterly unfair it was that my friend had to move and the other lady should have. As the bus went on its normal route, more and more people board the bus, each and every one complaining about the walker in the aisle. The passengers on the bus who witnessed what happened informed them why it was there, to which they turned their attention to Karen, calling her out on it and demanding that she switch seats with my friend. It's at this point Karen scolds all of them for taking the side of a white woman, and how if Rosa Parks didn't move to the back of the bus, neither should she. She even called out the people of color for sitting in the back by their own choice. All the while, my friend's sitting there quietly watching the entertainment. It actually got so bad with all the shouting that the bus driver pulls off to the side of the road and tore everyone a new one for being loud and shouting. Karen actually had the audacity to claim that she was the victim of their harassment, and she demanded a free month-long bus pass or else she'd be reporting this to the city. The bus driver was having none of it though. He points to the 3 cameras on the bus and he said, "Feel free to show them the evidence. Now get off my bus." Karen of course tries to argue, but the bus driver stops her and says, "Now." She then stood up, picked up her purse, and walked off the bus. Now, there's a bus stop like every block, so she didn't have to walk far, but she did have to wait for the next bus to come around. The bus driver also helped my friend back into an appropriate seat. The scooter guy even felt like he needed to apologize, saying that he felt it was all his fault. My friend assured him it wasn't, and they shared a good laugh. Yeah, that Karen definitely deserved to be shamed by the whole bus after that little stunt. Like forcing an old woman in a walker to move to the back of the bus while she, an able-bodied person, sat smugly in that seat and, dare I say, played the race card. Oh my goodness. And for all who might be thinking that the bus driver's also to blame for not just telling the Karen to move in the first place, refer to what she said about Rosa Parks, like the guy was probably trying to avoid a whole blow-up of the situation. But little did he know, right? It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And this person also shares a comment with a similar story, and they say, "This happened about a year ago. I, a 20-year-old female at the time, severely sprained a tendon in my leg, and every time I walked or stood up, I was in a lot of pain. I had been taking Ubers everywhere for a while, but when my destination was a short walk from the subway station, I would sometimes suck it up and take the subway anyways, because I couldn't afford to take Ubers all the time. It was honestly brutal, but with some pain meds and a relatively high pain tolerance, I could make it a block or so. That said, I got a seat on the subway and I sat there for a few stops, but it wasn't long before a woman with 2 small children arrived. In all fairness, the woman did seem like she was struggling, so I understood when she said for me to get up. There was one seat open next to me, but she needed one for each child. Now, I believe she asked me in particular, not only because there was a seat open next to me, but because I seemed to be the youngest in the subway car. I did feel bad, but I responded that I was injured, that I would be in a lot of pain if I stood up, and I had quite a few stops before I arrived at my destination. At that, the woman began berating me, saying that I had no respect for my elders, that I didn't understand how difficult it was to be a mother managing 2 small kids in public. When I tried to stand up for myself, she then told me that I wasn't wearing a cast, so I must not be that injured after all, and that I was just heartless for not giving up my seat. I then suggest that she ask someone else, but she wasn't having it. The woman ends up sitting one kid down and holding onto the other while standing. She berated me for another minute or 2, and then she left for other open seats when a few other people got off the train. The woman glared at me until she arrived at her stop, which was like 10 minutes. So a few years ago, I was working as a conductor for a local train company. As we were about to leave a station, a warning was issued that something was wrong with the train signal transmitter. As per protocol, the passengers were asked to leave the train and move to a replacement bus. Now, it was kind of late, around 7 or 8 p.m., and there was maybe 20 people on board, so we didn't think much of it. About 10 minutes pass, and as I'm making my way to the back of the train to check a control panel, I notice a man still sitting in one of the seats in the last cart. I stop, a little confused, and I say, "Excuse me, sir, but perhaps you didn't hear before. The train is..." The man, not even looking up from his phone, tells me, yeah, I heard you." Me, now actually confused, pause for a bit, and I say, "Well, sir, you have to leave the train." The guy then says, "I'm sure we'll be moving again soon." I respond, "Sir, that doesn't matter. No passengers are allowed to stay on the train." And this is when the guy, condescendingly as F, I might add, said, "Look, girly, I'm not getting off this train just so you and your lazy friends up there," pointing to the camera in the corner, "can have a break." As he spoke, the guy got up from his seat. This man was probably late 40s, easily 6'5" and 240 pounds. The guy was towering over my 5'4", 21-year-old skinny self. I knew he was trying to intimidate me to leave, but since the cameras were on, and he'd even pointed them out himself, I found it hard to believe that he would actually do something. So I pressed on, and I said, "Sir, I'm asking you politely to step off this train." The guy just huffed at me and then sat back down without answering me. I then say, "Sir." He just grinned at me and said, "No, I don't feel like it." By this point, I'm getting frustrated and tired with this bigot. I muster my sternest look and voice and try one last time, and I say, "Sir, the train's not gonna move and you are not allowed to be on it." He then says, "I'm not effing moving. Are you really this dumb? Just shut the F up and don't tell me anything unless it's that we're at the next station." That's when I thought to myself, well, alright. I paint on my customer service smile and I tell him with a sugary voice, "Alright, sir, I will tell you when we're at the next station." I can hear him mutter under his breath as I leave. I then tell my coworker what happened and he freaks out at first. But we're not allowed to forcibly remove passengers ourselves, and the nearest security guard is 45 minutes away. I tell him to leave the situation to me. 20 minutes pass and the signal transmitter error is solved. We get permission to move and we're told to go back to our starting station to wait for our next scheduled trip. This of course means that we're turning around, not continuing our planned trip. It doesn't take long from when we leave the station that there's a knock on my door. I know it's the man, but as he can't see into my cabin, I don't answer the door. A few more knocks and then he leaves. The trip back to our starting station takes about 45 minutes, and I call ahead to have a security guard waiting there for us. As we approach the station, I find the man pacing the hallways, and I can tell he's absolutely furious, like he wants to hit something, someone. I'm trying so hard not to laugh out loud at his fat, tomato red face. I say, "Sir, we're nearing the next station." Him, trembling over his words in anger, said, "This is not my effing station, you dumb." Insert the C word here. I just look at him dead in the eye with a fake, very overly done confused face as the train pulls up to the platform, and I can see the guard through the window. I say to him, "Well, no sir, it's not, but you told me not to talk to you unless it was to tell you when we're at the next station. This is the next station. We're here, so I'm telling you." And oh boy, hearing those words, the man was visibly shaking at that point. He was spitting out words that I couldn't comprehend. The guy probably wanted to throw me out the window or something. When the security guard taps him on the shoulder and asked him to step off the train, the guy exploded in a fit of rage, getting aggressive with them, which ultimately ends with the police arresting him and escorting him off the premises. I reckon it took a hefty amount of unnecessary cash and time to get to his destination after that, while I was left with a very amusing story to tell my coworkers. You know what they say, guys, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? Like, it was already satisfying enough that the train went back to the starting station, but knowing that the guy ended up getting arrested and probably didn't make it to his destination that night, like, that just added the cherry on top of an already wonderfully delicious post. And I think many will agree that there's nothing more satisfying than a smug, entitled idiot not getting what they want and getting arrested. And this person comments and they share a similar satisfying story. So I'm a bus driver. If you've ever been on a bus, passengers have to press a stop button if they want the bus to stop at the next stop. Pressing the stop button flicks on a huge banner on the front of the bus, along with making a loud ding. There's multiple stop buttons on a bus. So that said, the condition of buses are quite bad here. Some of the stop buttons are faulty. It's usually not a big deal, as passengers can see if the banner is flicked on, and if it's not, the passenger can just press another button, or they can verbally tell me to stop. However, it doesn't register with some passengers that there's a huge, visible, and audible banner. Unfortunately, these same passengers tend to lose their minds easily. So that said, it was about 9:30 p.m. and I was driving between two large suburbs. Let's call them Sunnydale and Riverdale. A passenger must have pressed the stop button, but it doesn't register on the banner. As I drove past the stop, the guy yells, "Hey, you effing idiot! You missed my stop, a-hole!" I apologize, and I try to explain to him that the button must have been faulty, and that I would drop him off at the next stop, which wasn't too far ahead. I told him I can't drop him off on the side of the road because that's not something we're allowed to do, as it was a busy road. I can't just stop traffic to let him out. The passenger just yells at me and says, "Stop talking crap and open the door, you effing C-word." I just stop at the next stop, about 500 meters ahead, but the passenger yells, "Just go to Riverdale, I ain't walking." Now, what the passenger didn't know was that since Sunnyvale was a bigger town, the last bus from Sunnyvale to Riverdale was later than the last bus from Riverdale to Sunnyvale. He would be stranded at Riverdale, 4 kilometers away from his stop. So I just kept driving to Riverdale as the passenger requested. I dropped him and the other passengers off and then closed the door. I could see him checking the posted timetable on the bus stop. I put my bus into gear and then pulled out, and that's when I hear him exclaim, "Hey, wait," as I did so. Unfortunately, I couldn't have dropped him back to his stop even if I wanted to. I have a strict schedule and change route numbers after each trip. My schedule was now to fill up the bus with diesel and then head back to the depot. So I fill up my bus and headed back to the bus depot. As I drove back, I saw him walking on the side of the road. It went from him having to walk 500 meters to 4 kilometers. So for clarification and understanding purposes, I have a medical condition in which my blood circulation is extremely weak. My average resting pulse is around 45 beats per minute. When I sleep, it can go down to 30 beats per minute, endangering my life. When I'm physically active, not resting, etc., my pulse rises to around 60 beats per minute. A pulse of around 70 beats per minute for me is like 130 beats per minute for somebody with a normal or healthy blood circulation, so I do pass out extremely easily. Therefore, I need to be super careful about my movements, actions, and other stuff, or else I'll get knocked unconscious in seconds of standing up. So with that out of the way, I never thought that I would encounter an entitled Karen myself, but unfortunately, I did yesterday. It was around 8:30 in the morning, and I was riding the bus to university. So I sit there on the bus, listening to music, minding my own business, when all of a sudden, somebody taps me on the arm. I hear, "Excuse me, young man. Could you please get up? My son's legs are tired," and that's when I stop her and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but I need to be sitting down right now. I actually can't." The woman presses on and says, "Oh, come on. There's plenty of room for you to stand. Just get up and give us the spot." I tell her I really can't. I'm sorry. If I get up right now, I will. Karen then says, "Just get up. What's wrong with you?" People nowadays are just so lazy and they don't want to stand. I have a kid. While I'm trying to explain to Karen that I have a certain condition in which I need to be careful about my movements because my pulse and circulation is extremely weak and fragile, she keeps on screaming how I was stealing a seat from a child and how lazy I am for not standing up for a mother and her child. Right about now, I was feeling my pulse rising because of the argument and stress the lady was causing me, and I got extremely anxious. I was thinking to myself, I don't want to pass out on public transport. Her son looked really uncomfortable through this whole argument, and at one point, he even tried to tell his mom to leave me alone. The rest of the bus, of course, caught attention to the situation. All of a sudden, the Karen grabs my hand and she tries to take my pulse, I guess. And she says, "Your pulse seems fine. There's nothing wrong with you, so stand up." She then pulls me out of the seat, leaving me standing on the bus with an already way too high pulse for me and my condition. I tried to walk a few steps to find something to hold on to so I wouldn't fall, but it was already too late and I fell to the ground, getting unconscious in the middle of a bus. What happened after that, I don't quite know. I became conscious and I was laying wrapped up in a blanket on the pavement, surrounded by paramedics, the police, and the bus driver. They explained to me what happened while I was gone. They told me the police took statements from the woman, some other people on the bus, and the bus driver, and they took the woman in custody. They asked me if I wanted to give a statement now or later when I recovered, and if I wanted to press charges for assault. And of course, absolutely I did. All I heard from her after I woke up was her screaming in disbelief and crying. All the buses for this specific line was forced to stop, just because an entitled mother did not get what she wanted. Holy moly, guys, and this is exactly why you never, ever put your hands on strangers, because you never know, right? Like, I bet Karen didn't expect it to get to that point, and I absolutely love how she started crying in disbelief that she was arrested. Like, this is a great example of F around and find out. Also, it's awesome to hear that OP's pressing charges, like way to add insult to an already devastated Karen. I think it's safe to say that she'll never do that again. So I, a 30-year-old female, am 8 months pregnant. I take public transport to work daily. I'm always exhausted because I have to work extra time to be able to afford basic necessities. I take the bus to work every day, and oftentimes it's packed. But I do get lucky enough when decent folks volunteer their seats for me. Now, I should also mention that I don't use my pregnancy as an excuse to get what I want, but people just offer me their seats by themselves, which is kind and sweet. So that said, Wednesday, I get on the bus like usual, but this time there's one empty seat. I go to sit, but I find a guy in his business attire just sitting there with his hand on the empty seat, sort of like resting it on the seat. I say, "Excuse me," and then ask him to remove his hand so I can sit. But that's when he tells me the seat was taken. So I ask, by who? And with the biggest smirk on his face, he says, and I'm not gonna lie, his hand. I did laugh a little, thinking it was a joke, so I asked him to remove it so I could sit. But the guy refuses again, saying sternly, "This seat is taken." Of course, folks start staring at him, and I tell him I'm tired and I need to sit. And he replies that my pregnancy isn't his problem. I had enough at this point. My legs were burning and my back was hurting, so I go ahead and sit on his hand. The guy then freaks out and he tries to remove it quickly while shouting at me. He then starts arguing how disrespectful I was to do this inappropriate thing, and in public, no less. I argue back, but then after, he just gets off the bus, saying I was being inappropriate and disrespectful. Everybody starts staring at me, and I just sit there feeling a bit of shame about what happened. I tell my husband about this incident, and he basically what the effed the entire time. And then he says that I indeed did act inappropriately, and I shouldn't have made this guy uncomfortable by sitting on his hand like that, forcing myself into his seat. He tells me that I pulled a total Karen move, and that I effed up and this was totally inappropriate. This was despite me saying that I was so tired of standing, and I was in desperate need to sit down. So am I the a-hole in this situation? Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna argue and say that OP is the a-hole in this situation. And seriously, shame on OP's husband for calling her a Karen. Like, defend your wife, dude. Like, your pregnant wife was telling you a story of how she could barely stand, and this D-bag just smirked at her and said this seat was taken by his hand. So your wife couldn't sit, and you side with him? Honestly, in my opinion, that's the least OP could have done, and I hope he was made super uncomfortable because the guy needs to learn. And the top comment on this post says, "Not the a-hole, your husband is wrong." When I was in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, I used to use the public bus system every day, and I know this kind of rider. Sometimes there are snobs whose car's in the shop and they're horrified that they have to deal with a, gasp, stranger sitting next to them. Or they're touch phobic. Or they think I call dibs on 2 seats should be honored on a crowded bus. Good on you for sitting right down and not letting him get his way with hogging 2 seats. Everybody on that bus was on your side. And this person says it the best. This person says, "This isn't about whether someone should give up their seat for a pregnant woman. Your pregnancy is irrelevant here. You do not get 2 seats. Not for your bag, not to sprawl out or lay down, and definitely not for your hand." The guy shouldn't have tried to take up an extra seat, and he absolutely should have moved the first time you asked. I don't know whether that completely justifies sitting on his hand, but it's kind of unbelievable that he still didn't move his hand, as it was clear you were sitting. The guy was playing some kind of weird power trip chicken, and he lost. He's the a-hole. Guys, you know the deal. Let me know your thoughts on this situation. And for those who ride public transit regularly, what would you have done in this situation? What would you have done if an a-hole idiot refused to move his hand? Are you pulling the same move? And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our / entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady, where psycho Karens think that everyone on Earth is their slave. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.